My name is Captain Darius Cord of the 11117th Vostrium Guard, Commanding Officer of Strike Group Helix 9. This will serve as my final transmission, should the throne permit it to reach Imperial hands. If you are hearing this, know that everything I recount is true, and that none of us were prepared for what we found beneath Hive Orpheon. The Hive is lost, perhaps the entire world, and if the proper rites of containment are not enacted, the rot may spread far beyond this forsaken place. Our descent began under a veil of ash and static. Vox channels stuttered with intermittent bursts of white noise, the kind that makes your teeth ache. The pilot fought the controls, muttering curses as the Valkyrie bucked like a feral grox. From the open side ramp I saw the Hive sprawling below, a vast corpse of steel and stone. Entire districts lay dark, their towers standing like jagged teeth against the pale horizon. No heat signatures registered on our Auspex scans, yet deep below the surface, faint rhythmic pulses echoed, like the beating of some monstrous buried heart. The first sign that something was deeply wrong came when Trooper Anselm reported a strange anomaly on his personal Vox record. Every channel played backwards, distorted but undeniably familiar. We listened closely and realized it was our own voices. Messages from earlier missions played in reverse, as though time itself had been rewound and twisted. I ordered all recorders disabled, but a creeping unease settled over the squad. We are soldiers of the Imperium. We expect heretics, Xenos, even daemons, but the laws of time and sound are supposed to remain inviolate. When they bend, it feels as though reality itself is cracking. Orders were clear: secure the Hive's central cathedral, re-establish command protocols, and locate 3 missing patrols sent ahead of us. Orpheon's manufactorums produce vital munitions for the sector, and the silence from this Hive could not be tolerated. Command's last transmission ended mid-sentence, a sharp cut-off like a blade through a line. Since then only silence, except for those strange reversed echoes. The ecclesiarchy priest attached to our unit interpreted it as a test of faith. I did not argue, though his hands shook as he clutched his censer and whispered litanies. We descended through the upper platforms, weapons ready. The ash was everywhere, falling in soft, continuous drift. At first we assumed it was the aftermath of great fires, but there was no scent of burning, no heat damage. It was cold, dry, and utterly scentless. Structures bore no marks of struggle. Meals sat half-eaten on long-abandoned tables. Habitation units still cycled air and water, though no living soul breathed it. Servo skulls drifted in confused spirals, unable to return to their masters. Even the omnipresent background hum of the Hive's machinery seemed muted, subdued, as though the city itself were holding its breath. The men spoke little. In such silence, every word felt like a violation. My own thoughts seemed to echo too loudly inside my skull. We reached the main gates of the cathedral without resistance. They stood tall and unbroken, covered in dust but intact. 2 colossal imperial aquilus were mounted above, proud symbols of loyalty and order. At least they should have been. I froze when I saw them. Both aquilus were inverted, their wings pointed downward, their heads bowed unnaturally. No ropes or hooks held them in place. They simply hung there, upside down, as if gravity had been defied or reversed. The sight twisted something deep inside me. The priest fell to his knees, weeping silently. I ordered the squad to breach. Standard formations overlapping firearms. The doors groaned open under our effort, their hinges warped but functional. As we entered, I caught sight of my reflection in the cathedral's vast polished floor, pale, drawn, eyes hollow. Behind me, the squad's forms seemed blurred, indistinct, as though the floor did not entirely agree with reality. The nave stretched before us, its pillars like the ribs of some long-dead giant. No candles burned, yet a dim, sourceless light filled the space. As I signaled the all-clear, a sudden burst shrieked across every Vox channel at once, loud enough to make several men cry out and clutch their helmets. The sound was wrong, too sharp, too layered, like a scream stretched into 1,000 shards. Through the distortion, a single word emerged, repeated 3 times in a voice that was not human: abandon, abandon, abandon. Every soldier froze. The word hung in the air like the taste of metal on the tongue. My own heart pounded so hard it seemed to shake my vision. I forced myself to issue orders, to cling to the rote habits drilled into me by decades of service. Secure the area, establish a perimeter, prepare for contact. It was all meaningless against the vast cold silence pressing down on us, but action was the only shield we had. The last thing I remember before we pushed deeper into the cathedral was glancing back toward the inverted aquilus above the gates. For just a moment I could have sworn they trembled, as if unseen hands had set them swaying, but when I blinked, they were still again. Perhaps it was only my imagination, perhaps not. Either way, I kept that thought to myself. There are some truths soldiers are not ready to share aloud. The ash fell thicker as we moved deeper into the cathedral, settling on our armor and lenses, until everything seemed muted and grey, as though the world itself were fading away. Each breath tasted of cold stone and iron, though there was no true scent to it, nothing tangible to anchor the senses. The squad moved in disciplined silence, though I could sense the strain in every motion. We are trained to face enemies we can see and strike at. But this was something else entirely. Absence can be more terrifying than any blade. I took stock of the men as we pushed forward. Sergeant Varro, my second in command, remained steady, his voice calm even as his eyes darted toward every shadow. The zealot, Trooper Helix, clutched his worn prayer book as tightly as his lasgun, whispering half-formed litanies under his breath. Others were less composed. Trooper Bryn's hands trembled so violently he had to strap his weapon to his harness to keep from dropping it, and young Vox operator Drevin kept glancing at his pack as if expecting it to sprout teeth and devour him. These small fractures were the first signs of something festering beneath the surface. Soldiers can withstand only so much before discipline collapses into chaos. The interior of the cathedral was vast beyond reason, larger than the entire outer hab blocks we had passed through. Murals adorned the high walls, depicting imperial saints locked in eternal battle with daemons, their expressions carved into masks of noble suffering. Yet in the dim, sourceless light, those faces appeared wrong. The edges blurred when viewed directly, features melting into unfamiliar shapes that seemed to twitch when I turned away. We swept the nave, clearing alcoves and confessionals. Nothing, not even vermin, skittered in the dark. The emptiness gnawed at me more than any direct threat. A hive world of billions, and not a single living thing stirred. I checked my chrono and felt unease deepen. Hours had passed since our descent, yet it felt as if only minutes had slipped by. Time had become a thin, unreliable thread here. At the center of the nave lay a message carved directly into the stone floor. The lines were perfectly straight, etched with a precision no human hand could match. High Gothic characters formed the phrase, "The living shall not witness the night." The priest gasped, clutching his censer so tightly his knuckles cracked. "A heretical warning," he whispered. "Or a prophecy." Varro bent to examine the carving. Could be a threat from some rebellious sect. Could mean nothing. I crouched beside them, studying the letter. They were cut too cleanly, the stone edges almost polished, as if the message had not been carved but burned into reality itself. I ordered Drevin to log it for transmission later, though I doubted the Vox would carry our message beyond these cursed walls. As night, or what passed for night here, fell, we established a temporary command post in a side chapel. The squad worked in tense silence, laying out motion sensors, auspex beacons, and barricades fashioned from pews. The ash seeped into everything, clogging filters and muffling every step. It clung to skin and armor like a living thing, never melting, never dispersing. When I wiped my visor, the residue reformed in the exact same pattern moments later. That was when I began to suspect the ash was not entirely inert. Drevin worked feverishly at the Vox array, trying to boost our signal through the interference. He froze mid-task, staring wide-eyed at his headset. "Sir," he whispered, voice trembling, "there's something here." Background noise on every channel. I think it's chanting. I motioned for silence. The squad gathered as Drevin adjusted the gain. A low murmur filled the air, indistinct at first, then resolving into something rhythmic. Words emerged, alien syllables layered beneath familiar liturgical phrases, like two choirs singing in opposition. The effect was nauseating. Helix fell to his knees, vomiting up bile, while others clutched their heads in pain. "It's coming from everywhere," Drevin stammered, sweat dripping down his face. "All frequencies, all at once. I can't locate the source." I ordered him to shut it down, but the murmuring persisted even after the Vox was powered off. That was when I realized the sound wasn't in the devices, it was in us, or in the very air around us. Before panic could take root, the outer patrol returned, or rather, a single scout stumbled into the chapel alone. His armor was scorched, his eyes wild. He collapsed at our feet, clawing at my boots until Varro restrained him. Through sobs and gasps, he told us what he'd seen. "They were right in front of me, sir," he babbled. "Varro's whole squad, just ahead. Then, they folded, like paper, like a map being creased. They screamed, but not with voices, more like the sound of metal tearing. Then they were gone, just gone." "Gone?" Varro demanded, shaking him. The scout pointed to the far corridor, his hand trembling so violently he could barely form words. Their shadows stayed behind, he whispered. I saw them moving, twisting. They looked back at me and then the shadows followed me here. No one spoke. Even Halix's prayers faltered into silence. In that moment, every soldier understood. This was no simple mission gone wrong. Something beneath Hive Orpheon had broken the natural order, and we were standing on the fault line. I ordered a double guard placed on every entrance, though I knew it would do little good. Whatever hunted us was not bound by doors or barricades. As I stared into the darkness of the cathedral, I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down upon us, and the ash falling heavier still, like a shroud preparing to smother the living. Sleep did not come for any of us that night. The next morning brought no light, only a deeper, more oppressive gray that pressed down on the hive like a burial shroud. The ash still fell, soft and soundless, settling into every crevice, every pore of our armor. None of us had slept. Even those who closed their eyes for brief moments woke choking, swearing. They had felt hands clutching at their throats or heard whispers that faded the instant they stirred. When I ordered the men to rise, they obeyed with hollow expressions, their movements sluggish and mechanical, like puppets being jerked by unseen strings. The scout who returned alone lay restrained in the chapel's corner, shivering under a thermal blanket. His mind was broken, his speech reduced to mutters about shadows moving without masters. He repeated a single phrase over and over. The folds took them. Each repetition frayed at the nerves of the squad. Halix, wild-eyed and trembling, begged me to purge the man as a vessel of corruption. I refused. Even in madness, he was still a soldier of the Emperor, and his account was the only lid we had. That decision did not earn me loyalty. I could feel the squad's unity unraveling like a frayed banner in the wind. We departed in silence to retrace the lost patrol's last known route. I led from the front with Varro at my side, while Drevin staggered under the weight of his vox pack, muttering Binharic prayer scraps to ward off interference. The corridors we traversed were unfamiliar, though our maps insisted we had been there before. Corners bent at strange angles, and doorways seemed taller or narrower each time we passed through them. More than once I glanced back and saw fewer soldiers than I remembered bringing, only for the missing to reappear seconds later without explanation. I kept my doubts to myself, but my hands ached from gripping my weapon too tightly. As we moved, the ash thickened into drifts knee-deep in places. Our boots sank silently, leaving trails that vanished the moment we turned away. Drevin reported sporadic Auspex readings, blips of movement that dissolved into static whenever we approached. His face grew paler with each failure. There, sir," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Something's there, but the machine spirit refuses to show it clearly." Half an hour into our march, Varro halted us and pointed to the ground. There, imprinted in the ash, were tracks unlike any I'd seen before. They were symmetrical, and perfectly spaced, as if stamped by some immense precise mechanism. No irregularity, no variance of weight or stride, just a repeating pattern of circular impressions stretching endlessly into the dark. "Not human," Varro muttered. "Not even Xenos. This looks like machinery walking." Halix fell to his knees, clutching his prayer book and wailing liturgies of cleanse. I silenced him with a glare and ordered us forward. The trail led through a narrow corridor where the walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like the ribcage of some slumbering beast. The temperature fluctuated wildly. One moment a freezing gale seared our skin through the armor seals, the next a wave of humid heat drenched us in sweat. Pipes hissed overhead, releasing bursts of steam that smelled faintly of rust and blood. The tracks continued, utterly undisturbed by the changing environment. Drevin's Auspex began to wail softly, then abruptly cut out. He slammed the device with his fist, his face a mask of terror. "The readings, they're folding over themselves," he stammered, like two realities overlapping. Before I could respond, the engine seer attached to our squad approached, chanting in rapid Binharic. His mecha dendrites trembled as he scanned the walls. When I demanded an explanation, he merely hissed, "Data corrupted, space corrupt, pattern unclean," and then fell silent, as though the act of speaking further would draw something's attention. He refused to share his readings after that, guarding his instruments like sacred relics. The trail ended abruptly at a bulkhead, unlike any I had seen in my decades of service. It was vast and circular, forged from a black metal that seemed to drink in our lamplight. Across its surface were etched 9 concentric circles, each line carved deeper and sharper than the last. The very sight of it made my teeth ache and my eyes water, as though the pattern reached into the body and twisted it. Varro reached out to touch the outermost circle. Before I could stop him, The entire bulkhead thrummed like a struck bell. The sound was deep and resonant, reverberating through our bones, vibrating the ash around our boots into swirling spirals. It didn't stop. Even when we covered our ears, the resonance remained, a sound not of the air but of the mind itself. Drebin screamed, collapsing to his knees as blood poured from his nose and ears. Helix chanted louder, his voice breaking into sobs. The bulkhead began to shift, not opening outward or inward, but unfolding like the petals of a nightmarish flower. Beyond lay a vast black void descending into unknowable depths. A fetid gust of air surged up to meet us, carrying with it the stench of decay and something stranger, a sweetness that turned the stomach. The ash at our feet was drawn inward, spiraling into the darkness as though consumed by an unseen whirlpool. Form ranks, I barked, forcing authority into my voice. The squad obeyed with trembling hands. Varro took point, his face pale but resolute. We repelled into the void, our descent lit only by the cold glow of our helmet lamps. The walls around us were carved with murals of Imperial saints, but their faces had been gouged out and replaced with strange geometric sigils that shifted when viewed directly, shapes that seemed to burrow into the mind. Halfway down, Drebin's vox crackled to life, unbid. A distorted child's lullaby played in reverse, soft and mocking. No one dared to speak. We reached the bottom, and found ourselves in a circular chamber so vast our lights could not reach its limits. 9 archways surrounded us, perfectly spaced, like the numbers on a clock. The floor beneath our boots was smooth and black, reflecting our forms like a dark mirror. When we stepped, it rippled slightly, as though we stood on the surface of some unnatural liquid frozen in place. The engineer knelt, examining the material, his voice trembling as he muttered, "Pre-Imperial, older than the hive, older than mankind's claim." Then we saw it, on the far side of the chamber, a lone figure standing perfectly still, its silhouette barely visible through the haze of ash. Relief surged through the men. At last, a survivor. We approached cautiously, weapons ready, calling out challenges. The figure did not move, did not respond. When we were only a few steps away, it simply disintegrated into a cloud of ash, leaving behind a single object on the floor, an Imperial Guard dog tag still warm to the touch. The name etched upon it was Varro. Varro stared down at the dog tag lying in his palm, his face ashen beneath the glow of his helmet lamp. His name was etched there in perfect clarity, the metal still warm as if it had only just been taken from his neck. No one, even Helix, who had been mumbling prayers since the descent began, fell silent, his lips frozen mid-verse. The only sound was the low pulsing thrum that emanated from the bulkhead above, a deep vibration that never truly ceased, even when our ears could no longer register. I saw Varro's hands tremble, and feared for a moment he might throw the tag away, but instead he closed his fist around it and slipped it into a pouch with slow, deliberate care. "Form up," I ordered, my own voice sounding distant in my ears, as though spoken underwater. My words felt fragile here, like they might shatter if spoken too loudly. The men obeyed, weapons raised, though their movements were stiff and hesitant. None of us could shake the feeling that we were intruding on something ancient and away. The chamber ahead was vast and wrong, so perfectly symmetrical that it unsettled the mind. Our helmet lights revealed only fragments, towering archways, spaced evenly in a perfect circle, 9 in total. The walls between them were smooth and seamless, as if forged from a single slab of impossibly black stone. We advanced toward the nearest archway. As we approached, the air grew heavy, pressing down on our shoulders and chests, making every breath a low. The ash no longer fell freely, but swirled in slow, deliberate patterns, as though guided by an unseen will. I reached out to test the surface of one swirling column, and felt only freezing air, yet the ash shifted instantly, forming crude shapes like letters before scattering once more. Helix began to recite the Canticle of Purity, his voice trembling. Drebin shushed him with a sharp hiss, terrified of making any sound that might draw attention. The engineer crawled forward on spidery mechadendrites, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, as he whispered to himself in a constant stream of Benharic. His data probes extended into the black surface, and he emitted a high-pitched screech of static before convulsing violently. I hauled him back by his harness, but he continued to shake, foam bubbling at the edges of his mouth. Finally, he stilled and stared up at me with one human eye wide in terror, and the other augmetic lens flickering erratic. "This place," he rasped, voice metallic and broken, "predates all, pre-Imperium, pre-history. It should not exist." His mechadendrites twitched and recoiled like snakes. "The walls hum in binary. The pattern is recursive." Allah. His words set my teeth on edge, but before I could press him further,
A ripple spread beneath our boots. The black floor flexed like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. Though it did not break, I froze, holding up a clenched fist. The ripple expanded outward in perfect concentric circles, passing under each archway in turn until it vanished into the shadows beyond. Then silence, absolute and complete. Not even the soft hiss of our respirators remained. I gestured forward and Varro led the way into the first archway. Beyond it stretched a narrow passage sloping downward, walls etched with carvings that made my vision swim. At first glance they resembled imperial saints, their bodies posed in traditional hieratic form, but when I looked closer, I saw their faces had been gouged out and replaced with angular sigils, complex shapes that seemed to shift and interlock when stared at too long. My breath caught as I realized one sigil matched a recurring symbol I'd seen scratched into the walls of the upper hive, 9 intersecting lines forming a perfect spiral. We descended in a slow, tense silence. The air grew warmer, humid, like the breath of some buried creature. A faint, rhythmic vibration shuddered through the stone beneath our boots. Too slow to be a machine, Drebin clutched his vox tightly, eyes darting to every shadow. "Sir," he whispered over the squad channel, "there's something here with us." Multiple contacts, but the readings, Emperor, help me, they're inside the walls. Inside, Varro snapped. "What in the throne's name does that mean?" Drebin didn't answer. He only whimpered and pressed his headset against his ear as though trying to block something out. I nearly ordered him to remove it, but before I could, we reached a widening in the passage and stepped into another chamber. This one was smaller but no less strange. At its center stood a towering obelisk of the same black stone, its surface covered in endless lines of text that shifted when unobserved. The base of the obelisk was surrounded by piles of discarded items, imperial gear, tattered robes of the ecclesiarchy, mechanicus relics, all abandoned as if their owners had vanished mid-task. Varro crouched, lifting a broken lesk. The weapon's barrel was bent backward, as though melted and reshaped by some impossible force. "No signs of a struggle," he said quietly. "Whatever happened here wasn't a fight." I scanned the surrounding walls and felt my stomach knot. 9 alcoves encircled the chamber, each one containing a different object suspended in midair. A skull polished to a mirror sheen, a cracked data slate, a child's toy rendered in gold. The items hung without support, gently rotating as if caught in an unseen current. Helix fell to his knees and began wailing prayers, while 2 of the conscripts stumbled backward in open terror, eyes front. I barked, forcing my own dread down through sheer will. "These are artifacts of the foe, do not touch them." But even as I spoke, Drebin reached out toward the floating skull, his expression blank. Before anyone could stop him, his fingers brushed the surface. A blast of static roared through every vox unit simultaneously, deafening and sharp. Drebin screamed and staggered backward, clutching his head. Through the interference, I heard a single whisper, my own name spoken in my own voice, repeated 9 times in perfect unison. Then, as suddenly as it began, the static ceased. Drebin collapsed, twitching, his eyes rolled back. The skull spun lazily in the still air as if mocking us. I forced myself to breathe evenly, and signaled Varro to help me drag Drebin away. As we retreated from the alcoves, a low sound rose from the passage behind us. It was not quite a growl, nor fully mechanical, but something between. The walls trembled slightly, flakes of ash drifting from the ceiling like falling snow. We wheeled around, weapons ready, but the corridor was empty. Only the carvings stared back at us, their faceless forms somehow more accusing now. The sound grew louder, closer, yet there was still nothing visible. "Sir," Varro said, voice low and tight, "we need to leave, now." I nodded, though my gaze lingered on the obelisk. A part of me felt it watching us, studying us, perhaps even recording. As we began our retreat, I glanced back one final time and froze. The sigils on the obelisk had shifted into a single phrase in flawless high Gothic. "Witness, the 9th. My blood turned to. I turned to order the men to move faster, but the words caught in my throat, as the ripple beneath our feet began again, stronger this time, lifting us slightly from the ground. The 9 archways flared with a cold, unnatural light, and in that glow I saw shadows gathering, shapes moving just beyond comprehension. We fled in blind terror, sprinting through the passages as the light pursued us like a living thing. When we finally staggered back into the great circular chamber, I realized with dawning horror that the 9 archways were no longer behind us. They were ahead, arranged in a perfect circle once more, as though we had never left. The chamber had folded in on itself, trapping us in its design, and at the very center, a figure stood waiting, more solid than before, its features indistinct, yet unmistakably human. This time, It did not disintegrate. It raised one hand and pointed directly at Varro. Varro froze under that silent accusation, his body rigid, weapon held halfway between firing and falling. The figure's arm remained raised perfectly still, as though carved from stone. My instinct was to order a volley, to drown the thing in last fire, but some deeper instinct, older than discipline or fear, screamed at me to wait. The others shifted uneasily, breaths ragged through the voxnet. The silence between each inhalation felt stretched, too long, like the pause before a word never spoken. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished, not crumbling to ash this time, but blinking out of existence, entirely, leaving only Varro's shallow panicked breathing echoing over calms. The squad began to whisper, a low feverish buzz of confusion, and I silenced them with a hand gesture, though my own pulse hammered in my throat. Whatever we had encountered, it had singled Varro out deliberately. That was a threat I could neither fight, nor comprehend, and both possibilities weighed heavily on me. We fell back from the circle chamber in disciplined retreat, though it took every scrap of authority I possessed to keep the men from breaking into a rout. The passages beyond seemed subtly altered again. Angles shifted, when unobserved. Hallways that should have led back toward our established routes instead funneled us deeper. I marked our path with Auspex beacons, but when I checked a moment later, they were gone, as though plucked from existence. I didn't mention this to the others. Some truths only serve to unravel fragile morale. Drevin began muttering constantly over his headset, fragments of machine rituals mixed with pleading. His voice grew louder as static bled into every channel, making it difficult to separate his words from the interference. Then, beneath the hiss and crackle, I began to hear other voices, faint at first, like echoes from a great distance. They gradually swelled until the entire squad halted, heads turning as one. The voices were each man's own voice, repeating words we had spoken hours earlier in the upper hive, but warped and wrong, stretched into discordant tones. Layered beneath were additional voices, unfamiliar and harsh, speaking in a language that hurt to hear, a tongue that seemed to crawl inside the skull. The effect was nauseating, disorienting. Helix dropped to his knees, clawing at his helmet, as he screamed the catechism of hatred. Others backed into the walls, weapons raised at nothing. Kill the Vox, I ordered, struggling to keep my voice steady. Shut it, all down. Drevin obeyed instantly, fingers flying across his controls. The lights on his pack winked out one by one, until only the faint glow of his screen remained. For a blessed moment, silence returned. We all breathed as though surfacing from deep water. Then the whispering began again. This time it wasn't coming through the equipment. The sound existed in the air itself, thin and intimate, as though someone stood behind each of us, lips brushing the shell of the ear. The whispers spoke our names, repeating them softly, lovingly, like a parent coaxing a child to sleep. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached and ordered the men forward. Movement was our only defense. Stagnation felt like surrender.
We advanced into a cavernous chamber, where the ceiling was lost in shadow. The ash here was thicker, rising in drifts, waist-deep in places. Our progress was slow, each step a muted plunge. Shapes protruded from the ash. At first we thought them statues, but as our helmet lights swept across, we saw the truth. A patrol lay scattered across the chamber, but not dead in any conventional sense. Their bodies were transformed into figures of blackened salt, each frozen mid-motion. One soldier reached out with Alaskan forever raised. Another knelt as if in prayer, her mouth stretched wide in a soundless scream. The ash had fused into their flesh, preserving even the smallest details of armor and insignia. When Drevin touched one, the surface crumbled to powder beneath his fingers, dissolving into nothing. There was no blood, no sign of struggle. It was as if the men had simply stopped being alive and become monuments to their final action. The sight hollowed me in ways even battlefield carnage never had. These weren't casualties, they were warnings. Helix shrieked suddenly, pointing deeper into the ash sea. More statues stood there, arranged deliberately in concentric circles around a central mound. The pattern echoed the 9-circle design on the bulkhead, and my stomach twisted as realization dawned. This was a ritual site, carefully constructed from our own lost comrades. As we moved closer, the whispers in the air sharpened into coherence. They no longer repeated random names or sounds. They issued commands. My commands, exact phrases I had spoken since arriving on this cursed world. now uttered in a calm, detached tone that chilled me to the marrow. The final phrase rang out clearly across every channel at once. Though the Vox remained dead, fire upon your brethren. Chaos erupted. Half the squad spun on their heels, weapons snapping toward their own comrades. I bellowed for ceasefire, but my voice was drowned by panicked shouts and Lascan discharges. 2 men fell before the rest realized the error and held their fire. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Smoke rose in thin tendrils, mingling with the ash, and the dead lay twisted among the statues like offerings to some unseen god. Varro turned on me, his face flushed with rage. Sir, what is this? Are you giving orders we can't hear it? Is something using you? I stared at him, unable to form a coherent response. The truth was worse than his accusation. I had heard my own voice issuing the order, but I had not spoken it. Something here was learning us, imitating us, weaving lies from our very breath. The engine seer staggered forward, his metallic limbs jerking spasmodically. Perception compromised, he croaked. Cognition hijacked. Enemy is not external. It is within the signal itself. You are listening to your own undoing. Before I could process his words, Dreven screamed. His Vox pack flared to life on its own, spilling out a cacophony of reversed chants and sobbing voices. The noise vibrated through the floor, making the ash statues tremble and shift. Their heads began to turn, ever so slowly, until every frozen face was oriented toward us. I ordered an immediate withdrawal. As we retreated, the whispers followed, growing louder, closer, until it felt as though they were inside our helmets, whispering directly into our minds. My every step felt heavier, like trudging through a dream that wanted to hold me forever. When we finally stumbled into a narrow corridor leading upward, Dreven's pack went dead again with a sharp pop. In the sudden quiet, I realized something even more horrifying than before. The whispers hadn't stopped. They had simply learned to hide, waiting for the perfect moment to speak again. And when they did, I feared it would be in my own voice once more. The corridor ahead twisted upward like the spine of some titanic beast, narrowing until we were forced to move single file. The silence pressed down on us, broken only by the rasp of respirators and the crunch of ash beneath our boots. My mind replayed that last command over and over. Fire upon your brethren, spoken in my own voice, yet carrying a cold detachment no human throat could achieve. The words clung to me like oil, refusing to be washed away. Varro marched just behind me, his breathing harsh and uneven. I could feel the heat of his suspicion at my back, the weight of the squad's unspoken fear hanging in the air like a storm about to break. We emerged into a wide junction where the ash had settled into a swirling spiral, 9 perfect rings, forming a pattern identical to the bulkhead's carvings. Even a slight disturbance should have scattered it, yet the ash held firm, unbroken, as though it resisted the touch of the material world. I ordered the men to hold position while I scanned the surrounding passages. Dreven crouched by his Vox unit, fumbling with trembling hands to repair its damaged circuits. Sir, he whispered, I swear on the throne itself, I didn't. He broke off suddenly, eyes going wide. The Vox unit activated on its own, lights flaring blood red. My voice erupted from the speaker, clear and commanding. Enemy infiltration confirmed. Execute cleansing protocol. Fire upon your brethren. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the squad fractured. 2 troopers screamed and opened fire without hesitation, their Lascans spitting crimson bolts into the ranks. Chaos erupted instantly. Helix was cut down mid-prayer, his charred body collapsing in a heap. Bren returned fire blindly, striking a conscript through the throat. The air filled with the searing stink of burnt flesh, and the panicked cries of men who no longer knew friend from foe. Cease fire, I roared, throwing myself between the factions. My voice was swallowed by the cacophony. Varro grappled with one of the zealots, smashing his head into a bulkhead before ripping the weapon from his grasp. I tackled Bren, pinning him against the floor as he raved incoherently about shadows wearing our face. Blood pooled in the spiral of ash, yet even as it spread, the pattern remained untouched, the lines perfect and pristine. At last, silence fell. The survivors stood panting, weapons trembling in their hands, eyes wide and vacant. 2 more lay dead by friendly fire. Dreven crouched beside his Vox pack, sobbing, the machine's lights now cold and lifeless. He reached for me, pleading, "It wasn't me, sir. Emperor, witness me, it wasn't me." His words dissolved into broken sobs, I hauled him up. The enemy is manipulating our signals, I said, forcing calm into my tone. Not just our machines, our minds. None of you fired of your own will. The lie tasted bitter, but the alternative would have shattered what little cohesion we had left. Even so, Varro's gaze burned with accusation. He did not speak, but his silence was louder than any challenge. The engine seer dragged himself to his feet, mechadendrites twitching like agitated serpents. Non-Euclidean interference, he rasped. Perception compromised. The foe does not strike with claw or blade. It shapes what you see, what you hear. Truth becomes suggestion. Suggestion becomes law. His head jerked toward me, augmetic lens whirring. Even you, Commander, especially you. I ignored the implication. There was no time for doubt. Our mission remains unchanged. We need a clear Vox transmission to call for extraction. The Hive's central reactor has the power relays we need. We move now. Reluctantly they obeyed. As we advanced, the environment began to twist further. Walls elongated when we weren't looking. Doors shifted locations, and the ceiling seemed to rise higher with every step. The ashfall grew lighter until it stopped altogether. In its absence, the silence became absolute. No sound of footsteps, no hiss of air through filters, nothing but the hammering of our own hearts. Even the act of breathing felt muted, as if the very concept of sound had been stripped away. I raised a hand to halt the column. The absence of noise was a weapon in itself, gnawing at the mind. Drevin frantically tapped his Vox controls, but even the static was gone. He mouthed something at me, wide-eyed, but no voice emerged. His terror was infectious. The men began to glance at one another, their lips moving silently, gestures jerky and uncertain. Without sound, communication became fractured. Fear spread like contagion. The corridor widened into a circular chamber dominated by a vast dormant reactor core. Its towering structure loomed in the darkness, lit only by the pallid glow of our lamps. At first, relief surged through me. Machinery meant order, control, something familiar to cling to. That relief curdled when I saw the reactor's surface shifting. Metal plates flexed like muscle beneath skin, pipes pulsing in rhythm like veins. The engine seer approached, mechadendrites extending to interface with the machinery. His Benharic chant began silently in his throat, visible only in the trembling of his lips. Suddenly, his body convulsed violent. His limbs twisted inward, folding into impossible angles, and then without warning, he imploded into a single point of nothingness. There was no sound, no spray of blood, only an empty space where a man had once stood. Varro staggered backward, his face Drevin dropped to his knees, eyes wide in mute horror. My own vision swam as I tried to comprehend what I had witnessed. Then, as if to mock us, the engine seer's data key floated gently to the floor, landing with a soundless thud that none of us could hear. I bent to retrieve. The device's screen flickered to life, displaying a single message in cold green text. Phase 9 initiated. Prepare witnesses. A vibration trembled through the floor, subtle at first but growing steadily stronger. I felt it in my teeth, in the marrow of my bone. The men clutched their helmets, expressions contorted in silent agony. Then I realized, it wasn't merely a tremor. The vibration matched our heartbeats, perfectly synchronized. The chamber itself was pulsing with our life. One by one, the soldiers turned to me, eyes wide and terrified, as though expecting me to explain the unexplainable. My throat ached to shout, to issue orders, but no sound would come. The silence swallowed everything, leaving only that terrible perfect rhythm binding us together like insects caught in amber. Varro pointed toward the far wall, his gesture sharp with urgency. There, etched into the metal by some invisible force, words appeared in blood-red script. Only one shall lead, the others must burn. The floor rippled beneath us. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, merging into a single shape that rose up from the ground. It had no face, no form, only the suggestion of limbs, and a mouth that opened wider and wider, until it became an abyss. And then, in the void of silence, my own voice returned, not from a Vox, not from any external source but from within our own skulls. Calm, commanding, final. Fire upon your brethren. The order struck like a hammer blow inside my skull, so absolute, that for a heartbeat I almost obeyed. My finger twitched on the trigger, muscle memory, ready to slaughter without question. Around me, the others staggered as if struck physically, their eyes wide with terror and confusion. Varro fell to one knee, his rifle clattering to the floor in total silence. No muzzle flare, no panicked cries, no sound at all. The world had been mute. It was as though existence itself had been stripped of voice, leaving us moving in a nightmare, where only breath and heartbeat remained, felt but not heard. Bryn broke first, his mouth stretched wide, screaming, though no sound emerged. His lips formed words I could not hear, desperation etched deep in the whites of his eyes. He turned his weapon toward Drevin, who stood frozen, tears running down his face. I slammed into Bryn before he could fire, driving him back into the rippling black floor. The impact jarred my teeth, though there was no accompanying noise. My breath heaved in my chest, silent and ragged, as I wrestled the rifle from his grip. Varro helped me restrain him, pinning him to the shifting surface, while his mouth moved in voiceless, endless The shadow creature that had risen before us was gone. It had dissolved into a smear of unnatural darkness along the far wall, leaving only its effect lingering. A weight, a pressure, a command lodged inside our minds like shrapnel. Only one shall lead, the others must burn. The words repeated without sound, a thought that was not our own, carving itself deeper with every repetition. The squad looked to me for guidance, but what guidance could I give, when my own mind was fractured? I gestured sharply, forcing them into formation. Varro herded Drevin, and the others into a defensive circle while I moved to the reactor's core. The pulsating machinery seemed even more grotesque now. Metal plates flexed beneath the surface like strained tendons, vents exhaling bursts of air that stirred no sound, only ripples in the ash, drifting lazily around us. It was as if the hive's very lungs were breathing in silence. I held up the data key retrieved from the engine seer's remain. Its screen still glowed faintly, though no hum of power accompanied it. I slotted it into a terminal built into the core. Glyphs appeared instantly, writhing across the display, shifting faster than the human eye could follow. My helmet's translator struggled to keep pace, spitting out fragments of meaning in jagged bursts. Phase 9 complete. Witnesses aligned. Threshold awaits. Varro appeared at my side, his expression grim. He pointed to the walls, then to his own eyes. I turned and saw what he meant. Lines were appearing on the metal, etched by invisible hands, spreading outward in perfect spirals. The pattern matched the ash designs we had seen before, but now they were moving, pulsing in time with the rhythm beneath our feet. The chamber was alive. Panic threatened to consume the squad. Two of the conscripts bolted for the corridor, their movements frantic and jerky. I sprinted after them, closing the distance in silence. Before I could reach them, the corridor walls shifted like liquid. The fleeing soldiers were simply absorbed. One moment they were there, the next they had melted into the surface, their forms stretching and flattening, until they were part of the metal itself, faces frozen in silent agony. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat, though there was no sound even of my own wretch. Varro's hands gripped my shoulders, steadying me. His eyes blazed with determination, a wordless command. Focus. I nodded. There was no saving those men. We could only prevent the rest from sharing their fate. I signaled for the survivors to regroup and pressed forward. As we advanced deeper into the hive's central systems, the silence thickened. It became tactile, a physical force pressing against our eardrums and skin. Communication by hand signals grew erratic. Drevin lagged behind, swaying on his feet, his gaze unfocused. When I grabbed his arm, he mouthed words that my mind supplied rather than heard. "They're in the signal, sir. Not outside. Never outside." I shook him hard, and for a moment his eyes cleared. Then they rolled back and he collapsed bonelessly into the ash. His vox pack activated on its own. The display glowed with a single word repeated endlessly. Witness. I left the device behind. Whatever was speaking through it was no longer Drevin. Perhaps had never been. We pressed on, moving through a network of passages that grew increasingly organic in design. Walls curved and bulged like swollen flesh, the metal appearing wet, glistening under our lamps. The air was thick and damp, every breath tasting of rust and stagnant water. Occasionally, we passed alcoves where objects floated suspended in midair, a soldier's helmet, a weapon, a scrap of parchment, all rotating slowly, weightless. None of us dared to touch them. We emerged into a chamber so vast it seemed to have no ceiling. A faint phosphorescent glow emanated from veins running through the walls, casting everything in a sickly green pallor. At its center rose a structure resembling a throne, though misshapen and jagged, forged of fused machinery and bone. I approached cautiously, signaling the others to fan out. As I neared the throne, I felt the silence deepen, until it became suffocating. My vision blurred, and for a heartbeat, I saw the hive not as a city, but as a vast organism, curled in on itself, slumbering. The throne was its heart,
and we were intruders standing within its chest cavity. On the throne sat a single figure, motionless and shrouded in ash. Its head was bowed, hands resting on the armrests, as though in meditation. I circled carefully, scanning for threats. Varro moved to my flank, covering me with his rifle. The others kept their distance, visibly trembling. When I reached the front, the figure raised its head. It was me. My own face stared back, expression blank, eyes glowing faintly green. The sight drove the breath from my lung. The copy's lips moved, forming words I could not hear, but somehow I understood them all the same. Only silence remains. Only silence shall rule. Then the duplicate dissolved into a spray of ash that hung in the still air like mist. The silence shattered, not with sound but with motion. The walls convulsed, veins of green light flaring. The throne structure split open, revealing machinery that churned and writhed like a living thing. The ground bucked beneath us. Soldiers stumbled and fell, their bodies moving in slow, dreamlike arcs as gravity faltered. I saw Varro rise into the air, limbs flailing silently, before slamming back down. The rippling floor beneath us hardened into a glass-like surface, perfectly reflecting. I stared down and saw not my own reflection, but countless duplicates of myself, each one screaming silently, each one reaching upward as though drowning. Then came the hum. At first it was faint, more a vibration felt in the bones than a sound. Slowly it grew, rising in pitch and intensity until it filled the chamber with an oppressive resonance. The hum synchronized perfectly with our heartbeats, a terrible rhythm binding every living thing together. The men clutched their chests, mouths open in noiseless agony. Varro collapsed beside me, his body convulsing in time with the pulse. I staggered toward the throne, desperate to stop whatever mechanism drove this nightmare. The data key burned in my hand, its screen flashing symbols too fast to read. When I reached the throne, the hum ceased abrupt. The sudden absence was worse than the sound itself. I turned slowly, breath caught in my throat. Every soldier stood perfectly still, their heads turned toward me in unison. In their eyes was nothing but void. For a heartbeat, I thought time itself had frozen. The soldiers stood locked in place, each man's posture perfect and unnatural, their weapons hanging limply at their sides. Their eyes glimmered with a pale green light, the same hue that pulsed beneath the walls and machinery of this cursed hive. The throne behind me beat once, a slow, ponderous thrum that seemed to reverberate through my bones. Then they moved, not with the ragged motions of mortal men, but with a precise, unified grace that turned my blood cold. They stepped forward as one. I stumbled back, raising my weapon on instinct. Varro was among them, his face blank, expression erased like words scraped from parchment. My oldest companion, the man who had bled beside me through countless campaigns, now regarded me with perfect indifference. It was not him anymore. It was nothing at all. The realization struck deeper than any blade. The hum returned, rising beneath the skin like an infection. It didn't come from the walls this time. It came from us. A vibration in our chests, our skulls, in the very marrow of our bone. My pulse quickened in terror, and the hum matched it perfectly. With dawning horror, I understood. The sound was synchronizing our bodies, aligning them to some external will. The controlled soldiers moved closer, their boots striking the reflective surface in perfect rhythm. Their steps were silent, yet the pulse filled the air with its dreadful music. My own heart began to falter, struggling to keep its own pace. As the hum pulled it into alignment, I fell to one knee, gasping noiselessly, veins standing out beneath my skin as if trying to tear through. With desperate effort, I activated the data key. Its screen blazed to life, displaying streams of symbols too alien to comprehend. They shifted, forming crude approximations of Gothic script. Only fragments were legible. Witness array complete, convergence achieved, pulse active. Each word stabbed at my mind like a needle. I hurled the device away. Before it could burrow deeper into my thoughts, it struck the reflective surface and sank without a ripple, as though the floor had swallowed it whole. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This place wasn't merely a structure, it was a living mechanism, and we were trapped inside its circuitry. The soldiers advanced, forming a circle around me. Their movements remained slow and deliberate, as if savoring the inevitable. I scanned their faces for any sign of resistance, but there was nothing, not even a flicker. Varro stood directly opposite me, his rifle leveled with machine-like precision, his lips parted, and in the silence, I felt his words inside my skull rather than hearing them. Join us. I fired. The last bolt struck Varro squarely in the chest. There was no sound of impact, no scream. He simply collapsed backward, hitting the floor with a ripple like water disturbed. Then, impossibly, he rose again, unmarked, the green light in his eyes burning brighter. My breath. Death had no meaning here. The hive had stolen even that. The circle closed in. I braced for the end, but then the pulse stuttered. For the briefest moment, it faltered, as though a heart skipping a beat. The synchronized soldiers froze mid-step. A single chance. I seized it. I sprinted through the smallest gap, shoving past their motionless forms. The floor beneath me shivered and buckled, throwing me into a wild tumbling sprint. Behind me, the pulse surged back stronger than before, slamming into my body like a tidal wave. My vision blurred. The world folded inward and outward at once, corridors collapsing and reforming in impossible geometries. I ran through a maze that was rewriting itself with every step, each turn leading somewhere different than it had moments before. The ash returned, pouring from unseen vents in a choking storm. It coated my visor, my armor, the inside of my lungs. Shapes moved within it, half-glimpsed figures watching me run. I tried to ignore them, to focus only on forward momentum, but their forms shifted into familiar silhouettes. My squad mates, my past comrades, even my own reflection. Each shape mouthed silent words as I passed, their faces twisted in pleading or rage. I pushed onward, refusing to slow. The hum grew louder, no longer just a sound. It became a physical presence, pressing down on me, forcing me to my knees. My heart hammered wildly, trying to resist the external rhythm. I clawed at my chest, feeling as though my ribs might crack under the strain. The hum wanted me synchronized, wanted me to belong to the hive. Ahead, a dim light flickered. I crawled toward it, each movement a battle against invisible currents, dragging me back. The passage opened suddenly into a vast amphitheater. My breath caught at the sun. Tens of thousands of ash statues filled the space, arrayed in perfect concentric rings, facing a central altar. Their frozen forms were eerily lifelike, captured mid-movement, as if plucked from time itself. Soldiers, civilians, priests, workers, an entire hive's population assembled in eternal silence. Their faces were locked in expressions of rapture or terror, indistinguishable beneath the ash coating. I staggered into their midst, the oppressive hum echoing in my skull. The statues didn't move, but I felt their attention shift toward me, an intangible pressure of countless unseen eyes. I turned in a slow circle, heart pounding. The pulse was strongest here, radiating from the altar at the center. Its rhythm consumed everything, binding this ghastly congregation into one terrible whole. The altar itself was a single piece of black glass, perfectly smooth and seamless. As I drew closer, its surface rippled like liquid, despite appearing solid. A reflection emerged within it, not mine, but Varro's. His mouth moved, and this time, impossibly, I heard his voice. It was faint, distorted, but undeniably real. "Captain," he whispered. "It's so clear now. The silence, the order, it's beautiful." I stumbled backward, colliding with one of the statues. Its surface crumbled at my touch, dissolving into a cloud of ash, that hung motionless in the still air before settling again in a perfect outline of the figure's shape. Then the others moved. Every statue turned its head in unison, their motion slow and deliberate, like sleepers disturbed from a dream, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The pulse reached its crescendo, a deafening roar felt inside the bones rather than heard. My vision fractured. The statues began to step forward, their movements jerky at first, then smoother, more coordinated, until they marched in perfect synchronization toward the altar. I backed away, my boots slipping in the ash, desperate to escape, but there was nowhere left to run. The amphitheater's exits had folded shut behind me, the walls themselves reshaping into seamless barriers. I was trapped, the lone living witness, surrounded by a congregation of the dead. The pulse shifted, no longer external. It was inside me now, beating in my veins, dictating the rhythm of my very breath. My body moved without consent, step by step toward the altar. Above, high in the shadowed vault, a shape stirred, vast and indistinct. It leaned closer, and the statues fell to their knees as one. I understood that I was not escaping. I was being summoned. My legs moved of their own accord, each step matching the inexorable rhythm of the pulse. I tried to resist, to anchor my body with sheer will, but the command was inside me now, coiled around muscle and bone. The ash statues parted as I advanced, their heads turning in unison to follow me, hollow sockets fixed on my every motion. The air was thick with that impossible vibration, a sound that was not heard, but felt, a constant suffocating presence. My breath came ragged and shallow, though even the act of breathing seemed dictated by some external hand. The altar loomed ahead, smooth and flawless, a slab of black glass that rippled like liquid without ever breaking its surface. The closer I drew, the more the pulse intensified. It was not a single beat now, but a layered symphony of heart rhythms, countless lives woven together into one terrible song. Each step closer made my vision blur and double, and the statues around me seemed to flicker, shifting between shapes. At times they were strangers, at times men I had known, and at times exact replicas of myself, staring silently back at me. I reached the altar and dropped to one knee, my body betraying me completely. The surface shimmered, and then parted like a veil, revealing scenes beneath. I saw Drevin, alive and whole, laughing with the squad around a campfire. The image twisted, and suddenly he was on his knees, Vox pack blazing with green light, his mouth stretched wide in a scream that never ended. Then it shifted again, Drevin standing in the amphitheater beside the ash statues, his body swaying gently in rhythm with the pulse, eyes empty. I realized with sickening clarity that these were not visions of the past or future. They were all true, different layers of reality playing out simultaneously. A whisper emerged from the altar, faint at first, but unmistakable. It was Varro's voice. "Captain," it said, warm and calm, almost reverent. "Do you see now? This is the truth. The silence is not our enemy. It is freedom. It is unity. Look." The black glass rippled again, showing images of the entire hive in its prime. Factories alive with motion, civilians bustling through streets, priests chanting beneath banners of the Aquila. Then the vision changed. The same locations lay in ruin, ash, and emptiness everywhere. Another shift, and the hive existed as something in between, half alive, half dead, like a heartbeat caught between beats. The pulse rose higher, the rhythm becoming unbearable. I clutched my head, desperate to block it out, but the sound was inside me now, vibrating in my very thought. Varro's reflection appeared beside mine on the altar's surface. His lips moved, though his actual body was nowhere to be seen. "We were always meant to witness this," he said, his words threading directly into my mind. "The Emperor speaks through unity, and this is perfect unity. No chaos, no doubt, only harmony. Let go." I shook my head violently, trying to dispel the vision. My own reflection glared back at me, mouth moving in defiance, yet no sound emerged. The statues began to shift again. Their movements were jerky at first, but with each passing second they grew smoother, more fluid, until they marched forward in perfect synchronization. They closed in around the altar, forming concentric rings, their empty eyes staring not at me but through me.
The altar's surface fractured, cracks spiderwebbing outward from the center. Beneath the glass, something vast and black writhed like a living shadow. Heat blasted upward so intense it seared my armor, while a layer of frost formed instantly on the reflective floor beneath me. Hot and cold at once, impossible and wrong. The pulse reached a fever pitch. I could feel my own heart threatening to burst, my blood hammering against veins that could no longer contain it. The fractured surface bulged outward, and from it emerged a hand, pale, elongated, with fingers too many and too thin to be human. The hand pressed against the glass, and the crack widened with a wet, tearing sound that somehow existed beyond silence. The statues dropped to their knees as one, their heads bowing in absolute reverence. "Behold," Varro's voice intoned, though there was no source, no body, "the witness comes." The rest of the figure rose, pulling itself free of the altar. It had no fixed form, its shape flickering between bodies and faces, some alien, some painfully familiar. For an instant I saw my mother's face, then Varro's, then my own, all layered atop one another in a writhing nightmare. Its eyes were voids filled with shifting stars, and when it opened its mouth the pulse cut out entirely. The silence that followed was worse than any sound, absolute, total, suffocating. My own heartbeat stilled, my breath halted. The world seemed to hang suspended, frozen in that single moment. The witness raised its head, and the entire congregation of statues lifted theirs in perfect unison. Slowly, inexorably, they began to move toward me, their motions no longer jerky or hesitant. They flowed like water, like a single body. I stumbled backward, scrambling for any escape, but the reflective floor beneath me warped and folded. Every path led back to the altar. I fired my weapon wildly, lost bolts piercing the ash bodies, but they dissolved and reformed instantly, their shapes untouched by mortal force. Panic clawed at me, my breaths coming in rapid, silent gasps. The witness spoke not in words, but in a single overwhelming command that flooded my mind. "Witness." The statues halted, surrounding me in a perfect circle. The altar rose higher, the black glass reshaping into a vast eye-like structure that stared down upon me. Within its depths I saw countless scenes, battles across the galaxy, cities burning, planets devoured. I saw every death I had ever witnessed, every order I had ever given, every betrayal and sacrifice. It was all there, spinning in an endless spiral that led inward toward a single inescapable truth. There was no line between past and future, life and death. There was only this moment, repeated forever. The witness extended its many-fingered hand toward me. My body moved against my will, stepping forward, arm outstretched to meet it. Behind me, the statues began to chant, not aloud but inside my mind. Their collective thoughts merged into a single overwhelming voice that led every corner of my being. The ninth will be known, the ninth will be sealed, the ninth will be free. As our hands met, the pulse returned with catastrophic force. It didn't just fill the chamber, it filled everything. My vision exploded into light and darkness, my body tearing apart and reforming in endless cycles. The amphitheater, the hive, the entire planet seemed to beat in rhythm with that single monstrous heart. I screamed, but there was no sound, only the unending pulse. When it ended, I was on my knees before the altar, alone. The statues were gone, dissolved into drifting ash. The witness had vanished, leaving only its impression burned into the air like an afterimage. The altar stood pristine once more, its surface perfectly smooth and silent, as though nothing had ever happened. But I knew the truth. I was not alone. The witness was still here inside me, watching, waiting. The ash was still falling, though there was no breeze to carry it, no vent or draft to explain its constant steady descent. It clung to my armor and skin like a burial shroud as I knelt before the altar, gasping soundless breaths, trying to reclaim control over my body. My hands trembled violently, though whether from exhaustion or the lingering touch of the witness, I could not tell. Every muscle screamed with pain that felt more like memory than sensation, as though my flesh recalled being torn apart and reassembled countless times. The amphitheater was silent. The statues were gone, leaving only depressions in the ash where they had once stood. At first glance, it seemed as though they had never existed at all. But when I shifted my gaze, the impressions changed, showing brief glimpses of the frozen figures standing exactly where they had been, only to vanish again when I blinked. The effect was nauseating, like staring at two overlapping realities, neither fully solid, nor entirely false. I rose unsteadily, clutching my weapon like a lifeline. My breath rasped against the inside of my helmet, the only proof I was still alive and separate from this place. The altar behind me was smooth once more, reflecting only my own image, yet even that felt like a lie. My reflection's mouth twitched when mine did not, and its eyes glimmered faintly green in the dim light. I tore my gaze away before the sight could sink its hooks deeper. I staggered toward one of the exits, praying that at least one path remained open. The walls of the amphitheater seemed to flex with each step, contracting like the lungs of some titanic, buried creature. The ash rose in soft spirals, following me like a living tongue. Each swirl carried faint shapes, faces, limbs, fragments of armor, all dissolving the moment I tried to focus on them. Then the whisper began. It was so soft I thought it was only in my mind at first, a lingering echo of the witness. But the sound grew, threading through the silence like a blade sliding between ribs. It was Varro's voice. "Captain," it said, tender and familiar. "Don't leave. You'll be lost without us." I spun, rifle raised, though there was nothing behind me but ash. The voice came again, this time from my left, low and coaxing. "We are here. We've always been here. Just look." Shapes emerged from the drifting ash, first vague silhouettes, then clearer forms. Varro, Dreven, Halix and the others stood before me, whole and unmarked, their armor pristine. Relief surged through me so sharply, it almost knocked me from my feet. For one fragile moment, I believed they were real. "Varro," I croaked, my own voice raw. "By the throne," I thought. "Shh," he said, raising a hand. His expression was serene, almost beatific. "It's over now. You fought well, Captain. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." The others nodded, smiling faintly. They stepped closer, arms outstretched as though to embrace me. That was when I saw their shadows. They didn't match. The bodies moved one way while the shadows lagged a heartbeat behind, twitching unnaturally. Dreven's shadow was headless. Halix's lacked arms entirely. Varro's was stretched impossibly tall, its head grazing the vaulted ceiling. I opened fire. Last bolts tore through their bodies, ripping them into clouds of ash. The forms dissolved without a sound, leaving me alone once more. My breathing grew ragged, my visor fogging with condensation. I forced myself forward, deeper into the corridors beyond the amphitheater. The walls twisted and folded around me, corridors reshaping with every turn. No matter which path I chose, I always found myself descending. Downward was the only direction this place truly allowed. The further I went, the stronger the pull became. My limbs grew heavy, my vision tunneling, until the world narrowed to a single point of focus ahead. At last I emerged into another vast chamber. This one dwarfed even the amphitheater. It was an abyssal space with no visible ceiling, the walls curving inward like the inside of a colossal shell. 9 immense pillars surrounded a central dais, each pillar inscribed with shifting symbols that crawled like living things. Atop the dais stood the witness. Its form was clearer now, more defined, though still in constant flux. Faces rippled across its surface, appearing and vanishing in an endless cascade. Some were human, some alien, and some were faces I knew intimately. My squad, my family, even my own. The creature was not merely wearing these faces, it was them, an amalgamation of every soul it had ever consumed. When it turned toward me, reality seemed to bend. The air thickened, my lungs laboring as if drowning. Its presence filled every part of me, a weight that crushed thought and will alike. The pulse returned, deeper and slower than before, echoing through the chamber like the heartbeat of a god. You came, it said, though its voice was not sound. It was a thought, a certainty, pressed into the shape of language. The 9th witness has always been you. I shook my head violently. I don't understand. The witness descended the dais, moving without moving, its form gliding across the surface as though distance were meaningless. You were chosen before you were born. Every order you gave, every life you took, every sacrifice and betrayal, each step brought you here. You are the final piece. No, I growled, though my defiance sounded hollow even to my own ears. I am here to end this. It reached out with one many-fingered hand. The room dissolved into visions before I could recall. I saw every death I had ever caused. Soldiers cut down in ambushes, civilians caught in bombardments, comrades bleeding out beneath my hands. Each face stared at me, silent and accusing. The vision shifted to show those same individuals standing beside the witness, their mouths open in voiceless chants. They had not died. They had been collected. The creature's voice filled me completely. They are not gone. They are perfect. One will, one purpose. As you will. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. Why me? Because you survived, it said simply. Because you remember. Because you lead. Its many faces merged into one, mine. I stared up at myself, pale and hollow-eyed, lips curling into a smile I did not recognize. This is what leadership has always been, the witness continued, one voice commanding many bodies. The Imperium taught you this truth. We simply make it honest. The pillars began to glow, the symbols spiraling upward in streams of light. The chamber shook violently. The pulse became unbearable, rattling my teeth, hammering inside my skull. I understood, in that moment, what the ritual meant. The 9 phases were complete. The witness had gathered its congregation. Now it would spread beyond this hive, beyond this planet, carrying its perfect unity to every corner of the galaxy. I raised my weapon, screaming in defiance. My voice was swallowed instantly by the pulse, yet I fired again and again, bolts of searing light striking the creature's form. The witness staggered slightly, not in pain but in amusement. My own face laughed back at me, a soundless mockery. You cannot kill what you are, it said. You are the 9th witness. The chamber folded inward. The pillars collapsed into streams of black liquid, rushing toward the dead. The witness merged with them, its shape growing vast and indistinct. A single thought filled my mind, drowning out all else. Join, witness, lead. I ran. The corridors reshaped themselves around me, the walls closing in like jaws. Behind me, the pulse grew louder, faster, consuming everything. The hive itself was waking, and it was alive. I understood then what Varro had tried to tell me. There had never been an enemy to fight. The enemy was the hive. The enemy was me. I ran, though running felt meaningless in a place where the very concept of distance was unraveled. Corridors warped around me, stretching and collapsing, their surfaces shifting from metal to bone to something slick and glistening that yielded beneath my boots like living flesh. The pulse thundered through it all, faster and faster, until it no longer felt like a sound but the driving force of the universe itself.
a beat dictating every motion. I could not tell if I was fleeing the witness, or being driven exactly where it wanted me to go. The walls flickered with impossible images as I passed, stuttering between past and present like a faulty picked feed. I saw the hive alive and thriving, workers shouting, factories roaring, priests marching beneath banners of the Aquila. Then, in the next instant, the same streets lay empty, ash falling in endless silence. A blink later they burned in war, bodies stacked high, las fire carving through smoke-choked alleys. The visions shifted too fast to track, overlapping until they bled together into a single night. My body staggered, my mind reeling. I stumbled into a chamber I did not recognize, though my mind insisted I had been here before. A broken statue of the Emperor loomed above, but its face was missing, replaced by the shifting spiral sigil I had seen beneath the bulkhead. The ash on the floor coiled into 9 perfect rings around my boots. I tried to step back, but my legs would not obey. The pulse within my chest matched the pattern exactly, as though my own heart had become part of the design. Shapes appeared at the edge of the room. At first they were blurry, like smoke caught in a gale, but they sharpened into figures I knew too well. Varro stood there, weapon at his side, his expression eerily calm. Beside him were Drevin and Halix, their bodies whole and unmarked, their armor pristine. Behind them, more forms emerged, soldiers from other regiments, civilians I had glimpsed in the upper hive, even comrades I had buried years before on distant battlefields. All stared silently at me, their eyes glowing with that same sickly green light. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. My voice sounded wrong, stretched and distorted. "You're not real, you're echoes." Varro stepped forward, his lips moved, and though no sound reached my ears, the meaning bloomed unbidden in my mind. "We are all real, Captain. Every moment, every choice. Here, there is no different. There is only the witness." The pulse surged, and time itself seemed to fracture. I saw Varro's face splinter into 1,000 versions, him as a child, a recruit, a veteran, a corpse. They overlapped and merged until I could no longer tell which was true. Drevin's body split into 3 separate timelines, one where he lived and smiled beside me, one where he burned in the reactor chamber, one where he stood silently as part of the congregation. All coexisted in the same space, each version perfectly valid, perfectly wrong. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as my memories tore apart. I saw every campaign I had ever fought, every order I had given, but none of them aligned. Battles won in one vision were lost in another. Men who had died under my command now stood alive, saluting me in crisp formation. I no longer knew which life I had lived, which choices were truly mine. The witness was rewriting not just the present, but the past itself. The chamber around me began to spin. The ash rings blurred into one continuous spiral, stretching upward into infinity. Within that spiral I saw the hive's true nature, a living organism, whose every structure was part of a greater pattern. The bulkheads were bones, the corridors veins, the reactor, a vast beating heart, and within that body I was just another cell, replaceable, meaningless, yet utterly necessary. The witness's voice cut through the chaos, cold and undeniable. "This is the truth you sought. There is no linear time, no separate self. You are all things, you are all deaths, you are all deaths, you are all doors given and obeyed." "No," I screamed, though my voice fractured into a dozen echoes, each one shouting a different word. "I won't become part of this." The witness appeared at the spiral's center, its form impossibly tall, stretching beyond the chamber's limit. Its many faces shifted and merged until only mine remained, gazing down with a terrible serenity. "You already are," it said. "You always were. The 9th witness is not chosen. The 9th witness is remembered." As it spoke, the pillars I had seen before rose from the floor, 9 massive spires of black stone etched with flowing symbols. Light spilled from their tips, weaving a lattice that encased me completely. Images swirled within the lattice, flickering between reality. In one, I saw myself giving the order to fire on my squad. In another, I watched Varro make the same decision while I stood among the dead. In yet another, I was the one executed, my body crumbling to ash, as faceless soldiers marched past. Each possibility was equally vivid, equally true. The lattice closed around me, and I understood the final phase of the ritual. The witness was not merely collecting lives, it was binding them into a single consciousness, a unity beyond mortality. Every timeline, every decision, would be folded together until there was no difference between leader and follower, victim and killer. The pulse slowed, my own heartbeat faltered, struggling to match its rhythm. The world outside the lattice became indistinct, dissolving into haze. I felt myself being pulled apart, each fragment of my being stretched across different realities. In one, I stood triumphant on the dais. In another, I lay broken beneath it. In another still, I was nothing more than ash drifting on a silent wind. Through it all, one constant remained, the voice of the witness. Accept it, it urged. The Imperium's illusion of individuality is a cage. Here, there is no cage, only freedom. I clenched my fists, fighting to hold on to something, anything. Of my memories surged in rapid succession. The laughter of my squad before a battle, the sight of Varro bleeding out on a battlefield long past, the weight of the first order I had ever given that condemned men to die. Each memory felt real, but I knew now they were all being rewritten, twisted to serve the ritual's design. No, I growled, forcing the word through gritted teeth. I am not yours. The witness's form wavered, its features momentarily unstable. You cannot deny what you are. I reached into my belt pouch, and felt the sharp edge of a demolition charge, one of the few physical certainties left to me. If I could not destroy the witness, perhaps I could disrupt the ritual, perhaps I could sever the link before it complete. My hand shook violently as I armed the device, the timer counting down in silent red numbers. The witness saw what I intended. Its face darkened, eyes blazing with emerald fire. The pulse surged violently, rattling the lattice, until fractures spread through its structure. My body screamed in agony as time itself seemed to splinter, but I held on, forcing my reality to stay fixed around a single undeniable truth. My will. You want me to lead? I shouted, voice rising above the pulse at last. Then follow this. I hurled the charge into the spiral's heart. For an instant, everything froze, every vision, every echo, every possible version of myself holding still in perfect unity. Then the chamber erupted in light. The pulse shattered, the walls tore apart, the hive screamed in a sound beyond sound, as reality unraveled around us. And through it all the witness's final thought reached me, cold and inevitable. Even destruction is another form of witnessing. Light consumed everything. It was not the light of fire or sun, but a raw tearing brilliance that seemed to flay reality itself. My body was thrown backward, tumbling through fragments of collapsing visions. Faces and places spun around me like shards of glass, cutting into my thought. I glimpsed the amphitheater, the cathedral, the hive as it once was, and as it would be, all collapsing inward, as the detonation ripped through the core of the witness's design. There was no sound, only the sickening sensation of something vast and eternal recoiling in pain. Or, I hit solid ground hard enough to knock the breath from my lungs. For a moment, I lay stunned, staring upward at a sky that wasn't a sky at all but a swirling vortex of ash and shadow. The reflective floor beneath me cracked and splintered like ice around me. Fragments of the hive's structure floated in suspension. Walls, machinery, even corpses, drifting weightlessly before dissolving into motes of green light. My visor display flickered wildly, unable to reconcile what it was seeing. I forced myself to stand, legs trembling. My demolition charge had torn a wound in the ritual, but it had not destroyed the witness. The pulse was gone, replaced by a deep, ragged thrum, like a wounded animal struggling to breathe. The chamber around me buckled and twisted, folding in ways no human mind could process. Through the chaos, I saw movement. Varro staggering toward me. His face was his own again, eyes wide with terror, armor scorched and cracked. "Captain," he shouted, his voice raw but blessedly real, "we have to get out. The whole hive's collapsed." He grabbed my arm, dragging me toward a passageway that now resembled a jagged wound torn through the world itself. Behind us, the remnants of the altar convulsed, black glass shards rising into the air like teeth. From within the ruins, a voice boomed, not through sound, but through every nerve and bone in my body. "You cannot flee. You are part of me." Varro flinched, clutching his head. "It's still here. I know," I rasped, forcing my legs to move. "We don't have to kill it. We just have to bury it." We stumbled through collapsing corridors, the walls sloughing away like rotting flesh. Time itself seemed unstable. In one moment, the passage was whole, lit by flickering lumen strips. In the next, it was half destroyed, filled with corpses and rubble. Then whole again, pristine and new, before cycling back through ruin and decay. I saw versions of myself ahead and behind, each running, each shouting orders that bled together into meaningless noise. Varro saw them too, His breathing hitched, his grip on his weapon white-knuckle. Which one's real, he asked, voice breaking. Doesn't matter, I snapped. Keep moving. At last, we burst into a surface plaza, or what remained of one. The hive above had collapsed inward, towers leaning like broken bone. The sky was a churning whirlpool of black ash and green light. Through it all, a faint rhythmic signal pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat echoing across the void. Our surviving Vox units crackled to life simultaneously, the sound sharp and alien. A voice emerged, distorted but recognizable. Imperial Command, orbiting above. This is Command Vessel Purgatio. We have detected anomalous energy signatures across Hive Orpheon. Respond immediately. Varro snatched his headset, shouting over the chaos. This is Captain Darius Cord of Strike Group Helix 9. The Hive is compromised beyond salvation. I repeat, compromised beyond salvation. Orbital strike authorized. Target coordinates are my current position. Static hissed. Then a cold, clipped reply. Captain, civilian casualties estimated in the millions. I grabbed the Vox, forcing my voice to remain steady. There are no civilians left, only it. If you don't act now, the anomaly will spread. This is not a planetary threat, it's systemic. A long pause. The witness's ragged thrum seemed to grow louder in that silence, as though it too were listening. Then Command responded, their words carrying the finality of a death sentence. Orbital strike confirmed. Stand clear. Varro turned to me, his expression unreadable. Sir, you just condemned an entire world. I met his gaze. It was already gone. A tremor shook the ground beneath us. From the broken streets, figures began to rise. Not living beings, but ash forms coalescing into humanoid shape. They emerged silently, thousands upon thousands, their heads turning in unison toward us. Their empty eyes glimmered with green light. The witness was rebuilding itself, using the hive's very matter as raw material. Varro fired into the horde, his lasgun's report lost beneath the unnatural silence. I joined him, but for every figure we destroyed, 10 more emerged. They moved without haste or anger, advancing steadily, their unity more terrifying than any charge. Above, the sky split open. From orbit, the first lance of fire descended, a spear of pure energy that lit the ruins like a false dawn. It struck the hive's heart with catastrophic force, vaporizing entire districts in an instant. The blast wave hit us a second later, hurling Varro and me backward. I tumbled through clouds of ash and debris, my body striking the ground hard enough to crack armor plates. I staggered upright, coughing, and looked toward the impact site. My blood ran cold. The destruction was incomplete. The ash figures still moved, their forms now glowing faintly with residual energy. Worse, the orbital strike's beam hung suspended in midair, frozen like glass. Fragments of fire and light hung around it, perfectly still, as if time itself had been The strike's not working, Varro gasped. It's stopping it. No, I said, realization dawning like ice water down my spine. It's absorbing it. The ground buckled. The pulse returned, deafening and absolute. The hive was no longer a play. It was a living engine, feeding on the destruction meant to kill it. In the distance, I saw the outline of something vast rising from the ruins, a shape too immense to comprehend, formed of ash, steel, and memory. The witness was no longer confined to the altar. It was the entire hive. Varro gripped my shoulder. We have to retreat to orbit. We can warn them. I shook my head. No retreat. If that thing leaves this world, it won't just consume systems. It'll rewrite them. The Vox crackled again. Command's voice was urgent. Panicked. Captain, strike incomplete. Prepare for secondary bombardment. I stared at the frozen beam of the first strike, then at the rising form of the witness. Even 1,000 bombardments would be meaningless now. There was only one solution, one terrible choice left. I turned to Varro. We'll hold it here whatever it takes. Tell Command to prepare full planetary annihilation. His eyes widened. But that will kill us. I finished for him. Yes, but if we fail, the galaxy dies screaming. The pulse surged again, rattling my teeth. The ash figures began to run. Varro raised his weapon. I did the same. Together we opened fire. As the sky burned above and the hive itself rose to meet us, the second bombardment began like the first fire raining from the heavens, lances of incandescent energy tearing through the blackened sky. But this time, I was ready for the last. I braced myself against the shattered remains of a manufactorum wall, one hand gripping Varro's arm, forcing him to stay low, as the world above us lit with the fury of the Emperor's wrath. The strikes fell in perfect formation, precision weapons designed to erase a city in moments. And yet, nothing. The beams didn't detonate on impact. They didn't even reach the ground. I looked up through the haze and felt my mind fracture. The fire was frozen mid-air, suspended in a web of invisible tension. 1,000 fragments of molten light hung perfectly still, each drop of destruction caught like an insect in amber. The lances themselves curved unnaturally, bent into impossible arcs as though time had been seized and kneaded by an unseen hand. What should have been obliteration became sculpture, a monument to futility. Emperor preserve us, Varro whispered, his voice breaking. The witness had stopped the strike not through strength of arms, but by severing the laws of reality itself. The hive was no longer merely absorbing energy, it was rewriting the flow of events, plucking moments from the stream of time, and holding them like toys. Around us, ash figures moved freely between these frozen fragments, unaffected by the stillness. They danced through falling rubble, weaving between raindrops of burning plasma that would never touch the ground. Each step they took was deliberate, mocking. The vox crackled at my hip, a voice stuttering with static. Captain status, report. The words fractured into pieces, then reversed, then dissolved entirely into silence. I hurled the unit away. Communication was meaningless now. Even causality had been stripped from us. Varro tugged at my shoulder. We have to fall back. There's nothing left we can do here. I turned to face him, my mouth dry, throat raw. If we retreat, that thing will rise into orbit and it will spread, sector by sector, world by world. It doesn't conquer, it rewrites. His face was pale beneath the grime, but his jaw tight. Then what's left? I didn't answer immediately. I stared at the frozen bombardment, at the figures gliding through their own execution, and understood the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't a battle anymore, it was a test. The witness didn't want us to fight, it wanted us to despair, to kneel and witness willingly. The entire ritual had been designed, not to destroy us, but to make us choose to surrender. We break the pattern, I said at last. We sever the link completely. If it feeds on order, we give it chaos. Varro's eyes narrowed. Chaos.
Not the kind you're thinking, I snapped. I mean disruption, unpredictability. If it controls time, we overload it with conflicting timelines until it collapses. Even as I said the words, I wasn't sure they made sense. They felt like someone else's thoughts implanted in my mind. Perhaps they were, but there was no alternative left. A tremor shook the ground beneath us. I turned just in time to see the hive itself moving, not collapsing, rising. Entire city blocks lifted like segments of a vast mechanical serpent, joining together to form a structure so immense it defied comprehension. The witness's form emerged within the shifting towers, a colossal silhouette made of ash, steel and memory. Its many heads swiveled in unison, their features flickering between millions of faces. Imperial Xenos, Diamonic. My own face appeared among them, laughing silently. The frozen bombardment cracked, hairline fractures spider-webbed through the suspended beams, each fissure glowing with sickly green light. The ash figures began to climb the beams, ascending toward orbit like ants climbing a tree. As they moved, fragments of their bodies detached and reformed, splitting into multiple versions of themselves, each climbing a different path. The witness wasn't merely resisting destruction, it was using the attack as scaffolding for its escape. By the throne, Varro breathed. It's leaving. Not yet, I said. Help me reach the command relay. If we can sink the charges, we might. I didn't finish. A section of frozen fire shattered above us, raining fragments of burning glass. One shard struck the ground beside Varro, cutting a perfect silent crater into the ash. He stared at it in disbelief, then up at the sky. The witness moved, its colossal form unfurled, arms extending like bridges between city blocks. Its countless eyes turned downward, fixing on us. Time stuttered, jerking like a damaged cog. One moment I was standing beside Varro, weapon raised. The next I was 10 meters away, crouched behind a barricade that hadn't existed seconds earlier. Varro screamed in confusion, his voice stretching unnaturally, the syllables arriving out of order. Past and present overlapped, layering on top of each other, until I could no longer tell which was true. In the midst of that chaos, the witness spoke, not in words but in the rearrangement of time itself. Images crashed through my mind, the hive's founding, its rise, its fall, all happening simultaneously. I saw the first stone laid, and the last body buried in the same heartbeat. and threaded through it all was the truth it wanted me to accept. There had never been a linear history, there was only now, and it owned every moment. No, I snarled, forcing myself to stand. My vision swam, showing a dozen different versions of this very instant. In one, Varro was dead. In another, he was killing me. In a third, we were both ash, scattered by a wind that hadn't yet begun to blow. I grabbed Varro by the shoulders, shaking him hard. Listen to me. None of this is real unless we agree it's real. That's its power. We have to act like our choices still matter. His eyes focused slowly, like a man surfacing from deep water. What do we do? I pointed to the frozen beams above us. We take control of the orbital strike manually. If we detonate them all at once, with no pattern, no precision, the overload might break its hold. It won't be able to process the chaos. Varro stared at me as if I'd lost my mind, which perhaps I had. That will destroy everything. Even if it works, we won't survive. We were never meant to survive. I said, we're the ninth witness. Our deaths are the proof. The ground split open, ash geysering upward. The witness roared without sound, its massive form descending toward us. Time fractured completely. I saw countless versions of the same moment. Us standing defiant, us running in terror, us kneeling in surrender. Each possibility fought to become reality. Varro met my gaze, then nodded once. Together, we sprinted toward the central relay tower, weaving through frozen fragments of fire and debris. The air itself resisted us, thick and heavy, as though we were swimming through congealed time. The witness reached down, its many hands closing around the beams like a puppeteer plucking strings. The ash figures screamed without sound, their mouths open in perfect oaths of devotion. I reached the relay. My fingers flew across the controls, bypassing the machine spirit's safeguard. Varro covered me, firing at anything that moved, though even his shots seemed uncertain. Bolts freezing mid-air, then resuming, then reversing. My display lit up with red runes. The Emperor's sigil flickered once before fading entirely. The witness hesitated. For the first time its movements faltered. It sensed what I was about to do. Now, I screamed. Varro slammed his hand onto the final rune. Above us, the frozen bombardment shattered complete. Every lance, every fragment of fire detonated at once, not in ordered sequence but in pure, uncontrollable chaos. The sky became a storm of annihilation, past and future colliding in a single instant. The witness shrieked, not through sound, but through the collapse of time itself. Everything blurred, every reality folding into every other. I saw the hive rise and fall 1,000 times in a single heartbeat. I saw myself live and die in endless loops. I saw the galaxy burning, then whole again, then burning once more. And then there was nothing but white light. The light did not fade so much as it fractured, breaking into 1,000 overlapping realities that spun and collided, like shards of glass suspended in a hurricane. I floated amid them, unmoored, my body no longer bound by weight or position. There was no up, no down, only a vast, boundless expanse of moments colliding in endless repetition. I saw myself and Varro sprinting across the plaza, frozen fire raining around us. I saw us lying dead, our bodies crumbling into ash. I saw us victorious, raising the Aquila banner over a hive rebuilt in gleaming perfection. I saw myself kneeling before the witness, my lips moving in silent devotion, as Varro's blank eyes stared down at me. All of it true, all of it false, all of it happening at once. The witness was everywhere. It was the storm, the fragments, the very rules of cause and effect. Its many voices bled together into one overwhelming thought that pressed against the walls of my mind, until they cracked. Witness, the word reverberated through me, a command and a plea all at once. My memories surged, no longer my own, but a river of countless lives and deaths. I was every soldier I had ever led, every civilian who had died beneath my orders, every enemy I had slain. The distinction between self and other disintegrated, leaving only a terrible unity. I struggled to hold on to something, anything. I focused on Varro's face, his scarred cheek and hard, steady gaze. For a fleeting moment, it was an anchor, keeping me separate from the storm. But even that began to twist. His face multiplied into a dozen versions. Young recruit, grizzled veteran, traitor, savior. In one fragment, he was laughing. In another, he was aiming a lascan at my heart. I screamed, though no sound emerged. My voice split into 1,000 echoes, each screaming a different truth. The shards of reality shifted, drawing together like converging tides. In the distance, or perhaps all around me, I saw the shape of the witness forming. Its outline was vaster than worlds, a shifting mass of faces and limbs, each emerging and dissolving in a constant, horrific cycle. At its core was a single featureless void, a perfect circle that pulled at everything around it like a black sun. "There is no choice," the witness said. "There never was. There is only the pattern. You are the ninth, the last piece. You are the seal and the key." "No," I roared, forcing the word through clenched teeth. "I am more than this. I am—" The witness's presence surged, drowning out my defiance. Visions slammed into me like hammer blows. I saw Hive Orpheon as it had been, teeming with billions. I saw it emptied, silent and ash-choked. I saw it reborn, the witness walking openly among its people, its voice carried on every breath, every heartbeat. In one vision, I stood beside it, crowned as its chosen herald. In another, I lay beneath it, my body dissolving into the substance of its form. Varro's voice cut through the storm, faint but real. "Captain, listen to me." I turned, and there he was, struggling toward me, through the collapsing fragments of reality. His form flickered, alive, dead, ash, blood, whole shattered, but his voice remained constant. "You are still you. Don't let it take that away." The witness laughed without sound, and Varro's body split into 9 separate versions, each one acting out a different fate. One Varro raised his weapon and fired on me. Another reached out to embrace me. A third turned and ran into the void. The others simply stared, mouths moving in silent chants. "You see," the witness said, "choice is an illusion. You have already done everything. You will do everything again. Join us, and end the pain of deciding." The void at its center opened wider. I felt its pull, the promise of release. If I surrendered, there would be no more doubt, no more failure. Every death I'd caused, every mistake I'd made, would dissolve into the perfection of the whole. It would be so easy. Varro's true form broke free of the others, reaching for me. "You're the ninth witness," he shouted. "That doesn't mean you serve it. It means you see it. You're the only one who can break the pattern." "How?" I shouted back, my words scattering into 1,000 echoes. "Tell me how." "You already know." His face was wild with desperation. "You just have to choose one path, one truth. Force it to matter." I understood then. The witness thrived on infinite possibilities, on every outcome existing simultaneously. It fed on the collapse of certainty. To destroy it, I didn't need power or weapon. I needed to impose a single, unbreakable reality, my will against its chaos. The void pulsed, sensing my realization. The frozen bombardment reappeared above us, suspended in countless loops. Scenes of my life unfolded around me, trying to distract me, to divide my attention. My first command, my first kill, the laughter of my squad, Varro bleeding out in my arms. All of them clamored for dominance. I closed my eyes. I thought of one moment, the memory of my squad, gathered before our descent, laughing and bickering, alive and whole. That was the truth I chose to hold. Not the witness, not the ash, not the endless spirals, just that single fragile moment. The void screamed, its perfect silence shattered, replaced by a raw, discordant roar. The fragments of reality around me trembled, some dissolving into nothing, others solidifying. The many versions of Varro collapsed into one, standing resolute beside me. "Now," he shouted, "end it." I opened my eyes, and raised my weapon. The void loomed before me, a wound in the universe itself. For one heartbeat, I saw every possible outcome: victory, failure, death, corruption, all stacked atop one another. Then I fired, and in that instant, I chose. The shot struck the void. The witness's form convulsed, its countless faces screaming in perfect unison. Light erupted outward, tearing through the hive, through the ash, through the very fabric of time. Varro grabbed my hand, and together we held our ground as the world unraveled around us. The witness's voice reached me one final time, faint and fading. "Even now, you witness me." Then it was gone. The pulse ceased. The ash fell still. Silence returned, not oppressive this time, but true, blessed silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the ruins of Hive Orpheon. The sky above was clear for the first time since our arrival. Varro was beside me, breathing hard, his eyes wide with disbelief. In the distance, the remains of the hive smoldered, its twisted spires finally still. But I knew the battle wasn't over. The witness was gone for now. Yet somewhere in the endless darkness of the galaxy,
It was waiting to be seen again, and when it returned, someone would have to choose once more. The silence was alien, not the smothering, unnatural quiet of the hive when the witness had ruled it, but a true absence of sound, a stillness born of exhaustion and ruin. For a long moment, I stood amid the rubble, unsure whether I was alive or some echo trapped in another fragment of reality. The ash lay heavy across the ruins, yet it no longer moved. It rested in drifts like snow over a graveyard. The air itself felt different, lighter, as though some immense weight had been lifted from the world. Varro stood beside me, his chest heaving, each breath ragged and uneven. His armor was cracked, his helmet missing entirely, his face streaked with soot and blood, but his eyes were clear. That clarity was more unsettling than his wounds. It meant this was real, that after all the folding and rewriting, we were truly. The hive stretched before us like a corpse picked clean by carrion. Towers that had once clawed at the sky now lay broken and twisted, some leaning at impossible angles, others reduced to stumps of blackened stone. The great plaza where we had fought our final battle was gone, replaced by a vast crater. Its edges glowed faintly, traces of energy shimmering like dying embers. Above, the sky was clear for the first time since our descent. No storm of ash, no suspended fire, just a vast star-scattered void. In that moment, I realized how long it had been since I had truly seen the stars. It felt almost wrong, like staring at something forbidden. Varro broke the silence first. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Is it over? I wanted to say, I wanted to believe that what we had done had ended the threat forever, but the truth sat heavy on my tongue. For this world, I said at last. Maybe. He turned to me sharply. Maybe. I met his gaze. The witness isn't a creature, Varro. It's an idea, a pattern. You can destroy its form, but the pattern remains, somewhere out there, in the warp or in the minds of men. It waits for someone to see it again, and when they do, I trailed off, unwilling to speak the rest aloud. Varro looked away, jaw clenched. His hands trembled slightly as he reloaded his weapon. Though there was nothing left to fight, he needed the ritual of it, the illusion of control. I understood. My own fingers itched for action, even though I knew there was none to take. The Vox unit on my belt crackled suddenly, making us both flinch. A voice came through, faint and fractured, but unmistakably Imperial command. Captain, report. Purgatio standing by for extraction. Casualty estimates. Extreme. Confirm. Planetary condition. I raised the unit to my lips, staring out over the crater where Hive Orpheon had once stood. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat closed. The words caught somewhere between truth and lies. This world is lost, I said finally. My voice was steady, but it felt like someone else was speaking through me. Initiate planetary cleansing. Full-scale exterminatus. No trace must remain. There was a long pause, filled only by the hiss of static. Then the cold, clipped reply came. Confirm. Preparing for cleansing protocols. Emperor guide you. The Vox went dead. Varro swallowed hard. Cleansing. That's millions more dead. They were already dead, I said, though the words rang hollow. What remains isn't them. You saw it. This place is a wound. If we leave it to fester, it will spread. He didn't argue, but the silence between us was thick with unspoken doubt. I couldn't blame him. I doubted myself as well. We began moving toward the extraction point, picking our way through the wreckage. The hive's ruins were eerily empty. No ash figures lurked in the shadows. No whispers echoed in our helmets. And yet, the further we walked, the more oppressive the stillness became. It was as if the silence itself were watching, judging. As we passed the remains of a collapsed chapel, I froze. In the center of the rubble, half buried in ash, lay a single object, a dog tag. I knelt and brushed the debris away, revealing the name etched into its surface. Varro's name. My stomach turned. Slowly, I looked up at him. He stared back, pale and trembling. That's impossible, he said, his voice cracking. You saw me drop mine back at the circle chamber. You saw. The words died on his lips. There was no need to finish. We both understood what it meant. Nothing here could be trusted complete. Even now, even after everything, the line between real and false was blurred. I slipped the tag into a pouch without comment and stood. Come on, we don't have much time. We walked in silence after that, each step measured and wary. When we reached the extraction zone, a single shuttle awaited us, its hull scorched and pitted from re-entry. The pilot barely glanced at us as we boarded. Perhaps he had seen too much war to care, or perhaps he sensed the wrongness clinging to us and wanted no part of it. Inside, the cabin was dim and close. Varro slumped into a seat, his eyes fixed on the floor. I remained standing, watching through the viewport as the ruins receded below us. The crater glowed faintly, like the dying ember of a fire that could never truly be extinguished. High above, the command vessel loomed. Beyond it, the black gulf of space waited, cold and infinite. Somewhere out there, other hives still stood, other worlds still lived, unaware of what might already be stirring beneath their foundation. As the shuttle docked, a final transmission echoed across the Vox. It was faint, almost too soft to hear, but the words were unmistakable. Witness. Varro's head snapped up. Did you? Yes, I said. My voice was like stone. I heard. We said nothing more as the docking clamps locked into place. The cleansing would begin soon. Fire would scour this world clean, erasing every trace of what had happened. But fire could not burn an idea. It could not silence a pattern. As the shuttle doors opened and cold, sterile light spilled inside, I realized the truth I had been avoiding since the moment we set foot on Hive Orpheon. The witness was gone from this place, but it was not gone from me.